Now, I don't normally do block for block tutorials, and I think most people know how I feel about them, that they don't really teach you much. But for this series, Pocket Builds, I am going to sort of do a block for block tutorial. I'm going to give you some dimensions and help you work to the scale that I'm building, but at the same time I want you to try and detail it differently, and I'll leave a lot open for creativity. That being said, let's get into our first one, which is the Pocket Castle. So obviously the first thing that needs to be said is I'm working with a flat world and the normal terrain isn't, so try and work with whatever terrain you want to build in. We're going to start with a very simple floor plan, and you want to build 3 by 3 by 3 by 3 with that 3 by 3 space in the middle. Then we want to extend out another 3 blocks, then a 5, then a 3, kind of just matching exactly what I'm doing here. It's very simple: 3 out, 5 in, making sure that you add that layer of depth, and then another 3, and you basically repeat this round until you have a square. Now it's kind of obvious to tell that these 3 by 3s are going to be the towers, and the rest is going to be the walls, with a little bit of depth planned in there as well. So now we need to raise this corner up 10 blocks. That's the recommended height I would suggest for this build. Now this is where creativity comes into play. We now need to detail each side. I decided to add a little bit of an indent with some red colour and some iron bars. This is where I would recommend you find a different way of detailing your castle so it doesn't look exactly the same as mine. Try and make it scream you. I obviously chose red because of the colour of my shirt. You then want to add some stone brick staircases for the crenellations of this tower. They are intentionally short to match the scale. I then went ahead and changed the stone to mix of stone brick and cracked stone brick, and then added a few more details. The detailing is up to you, but I would recommend using a mixture of grey blocks to create a texture for your tower. Just having it as stone will not have a nice effect. Once you've done that, you then need to replicate each tower into all 4 corners of your layout. This build may seem complicated to begin with, but once we get going and you do it step by step, it's actually fairly simple. We now obviously need to fill in the walls, so we're going to be using a very similar recipe to the towers. We're going to start with some normal stone, start detailing it, and then we're actually going to start some more complicated stuff with the detailing, adding extra layers. So these indents are going to be a common theme in the castle, and we're going to try and match that theme throughout the build. Now that bit is fairly simple, but up here we're going to add a lot of shape, and I'm going to take things very slowly. If you do want to copy me block for block, that is completely fine. So essentially what I'm doing is having a red backdrop and using a lot of staircases at different angles to produce some decorative shapes. They don't really add anything, they don't spell anything out, they're just a bunch of shapes put together. If you mess up an angle, it will look odd. Next, I then use stone brick staircase to try and produce an arch shape. This can get a little bit complicated because it's quite hard to read without the hitboxes directly visible. However, if you take things slow, you should be able to produce a shape much like that. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, I do stress that. On the other side, we just need to tidy things up, so we're going to go for these indent theme, as I said earlier, and then cover up any stained clay that's showing with some cobblestone staircase. So there we have one wall. Now that we've done that, much like the towers, we need to just go ahead and change the texture so it's not completely stone. It adds a level of detail that isn't present if it's just stone. We then go and replicate it, much like the towers, and produce the walls of our build. Now obviously it's going to take you a lot longer to replicate it than it does for me because I'm using World Edit. Now that's just speeding up the process for this tutorial. You don't need to see me build the same thing 4 times. You guys should be able to replicate something. But we do need to add a door. That is pretty essential. So I've just covered up the indent with some wood to indicate where the door should be, and then I added a bunch of buttons and a bit of an arch over it to decorate it. Very, very simple. Now you'll notice that there isn't actually a physical door. That's because we will go over an option to add a redstone door later. So just skirting around the walls, adding some detail and shape. So what are we going to do inside? Well, for the most part, we're going to have some sort of courtyard, but we want to add a keep. That's the main part of the castle and the bit that you can store stuff in. So you can see I marked where the center was and I created a square in line with where we made the indents. It should be fairly simple and obvious where this needs to go. You then raise up the tower, making sure that when you're just above the wall you create another indent. You will also notice that in the corners it is not completely square. I've added shape in the corners just by removing that corner block. That really helps give it some shape that it otherwise wouldn't have. This is the base of your tower and it's up to you how you want to detail it, but if you want to copy me, again, it's fairly simple to do. I've added the indentations, which is the kind of theme that I've been going for, added some cobblestone walls, some slabs, and some staircase to detail, and then along with some more indents with some further additions of iron bars, we start to get a real feel for the keep now. We're going to go ahead and start the top bit. Now this bit is a little bit harder because we're going to be adding a bit more shape. So you can see I added some cobblestone staircase on the indentations and then built a stone circular base above it. We're then going to use that to make some larger crenellations to the ones that we did earlier because we want this to stand out. I added some cobblestone walls on the top of those just to add more detail to the crenellations. I also added some cobblestone slab just to make sure that the shape was absolutely perfect on this build. I really like the shape of the keep and it's the key element to the castle. The walls create the base and the keep is what your eyes are drawn to. Now it's time to start changing all that stone into the mixture of grey blocks to produce a texture. This is what really adds the detail. A lot of people forget that adding just a couple of blocks in the mixture with the similar palette is what brings a lot of detail to a build. Next up, I'm now making just a very quick house. It's up to you what you want to fill your castle with. I don't want to tell you how to do it because, to be honest with you, the courtyard is yours for the making. As far as I'm concerned, the layout that we began with is the crux of the tutorial, and anything that you want to make inside is your creative freedom. The idea of this pocket build series is to produce something that looks good and isn't too difficult to make. Sometimes builds can be so daunting on a tutorial just because of the sheer size of it, but if you break this build down, it's incredibly simple. You have one segment of wall and tower and you replicate it round and you've got yourself a very easy, good looking castle. I've then gone and filled in all of the keeps just to make sure that you can walk around it and it's more practical, and added a flag on the top in my colours so that everyone knows that this belongs to me. You can make the flag as big or small as you want, it's up to you. I tend to do mine a bit like this, very rugged looking, so from a distance it actually looks like it's swaying in the wind. So that's the entire castle design. I really like it, and the idea of this pocket build is to have something very miniature. This is about as small as I can go for a castle, and this is my original design along with the help of BotBox. We both cracked out this design for everyone to use. Now, if you're happy just adding a normal door to this build and using it freely, this is where the video ends. However, if you want to have a hidden door that uses one of the buttons on the facade door, I'm going to give you a quick 2-minute tutorial on how to add a lovely hidden door so that you can keep everything looking really flush and neat and no need to add a physical door itself. So this is the redstone design. It's perhaps not the most compact thing. This was made by BotBox, so thank you very much. This is the in button and that is the out button. All we have to do is pretty much press the button, it creates a pulse which eventually fades out, it keeps the door open in the meantime and then fades and closes again, and this works on both sides. You don't really need to understand how it works, I just copied it, and so can you. I'm no redstone expert, but BotBox knew how to do this, so I'm just gonna copy him, much like you're gonna now copy me. So I hollowed out this entire area and added a few blocks underneath and a simple redstone wiring, where we're now going to add a bunch of comparators to create the delay that we're after. I added 4 and then a ring around and then another 4 going the other direction. That's probably the bit that's most complex. We then add a couple bits more, a stone block, with a redstone torch on. This is what's going to control the actual door, and a redstone on the top. Look, I'm not mumbo jumbo, and I know a lot of redstone people are probably cringing really hard at me trying to do this, but essentially, I'm trying my best, guys. I'm just going to copy what BotBox did and fit it into my build. It works. That's all we really need to know. If you can do it better, by all means, do it better. I'm just ringing round the outward connection from the door that's on the inside so that the button will work on the same comparator. That comparator system is literally just the delay, and then we just need to link up the two buttons. You'll notice I actually haven't placed the pistons yet. That's because the pistons are the last thing, if you ask me. You can test it without them. If you have any problems with the wall, just change it to a staircase block and the redstone will pass right through it and you can cover up anything else. So that's pretty much the redstone circuit working without the pistons right now. So we can see that it turns off and on as we wish on both buttons. So now all we need to do is add the pistons in the right place, knock out the bit of the wall that you don't need, and add the piston to that block and one above it and fill it back in. Let's give it another test to make sure it works, and it stays open for a substantial amount of time so that we can walk in. And now we need to just cover up the mess that we've made and never look at my horrible redstone ever again. Thank you, BotBox, for saving me. I would have never attempted this on my own. I rarely touch redstone. It's been absolutely years since I even tried to do it. So that's just a little bit embarrassing more than anything else. I should probably try some more redstone. But anyway, that is it for the build. Including the hidden door, that is everything you need for your pocket castle. I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed this build and this style. It's like semi-block for block and semi-time-lapse with a bit of creativity. I'd love to hear your comments on what you have to say about this video. Goodbye!